Knock, 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 Sheldon. Knock, 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 Sheldon. Knock, 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 Sheldon. You have heard that 1,000 times, except it was always Penny's name or Leonard's or Amy's. It is printed on t-shirts. It is a phone ringtone. People knock on their own friends' doors that way, as a little joke. It might be the single most famous knock in the history of television, and it is a wound. Sheldon Cooper started doing that triple knock as a 13-year-old boy on the day he believed he walked in on his father in bed with another woman. He never said a word about it to anyone. He just began knocking 3 times on every door for the rest of his life so that he would never again open a door onto something that could shatter him. We took a frightened child's coping ritual and we put it on a coffee mug. And that right there is the entire problem with how we watched this man for 12 years. Welcome back to 4A. Get settled in, because today we have to talk about the dark truth about Sheldon Cooper. The one the laugh track worked very, very hard to make sure you would never notice. Now let me say the obvious thing first so we can get past it together. This is not about the arrogance. It is not the contracts. It is not the bazinga. It is not the way he treated nearly every human being in his life like a slightly defective appliance. That is the surface. Everybody already sees that. You do not need me for that. The dark truth runs underneath all of it. And once you see it, I promise you will never watch a single episode the same way again. Let me tell you where I am coming from. I have watched The Big Bang Theory from the pilot to the finale more times than I would ever admit out loud at a dinner party. And then I went back and I watched Young Sheldon. And somewhere in the middle of that, I stopped laughing. Because Young Sheldon did something quietly brutal. It went back and it showed us the child. And once you have seen the child, the adult stops being a punchline and starts being a casualty. So here is the lens. Here is the one idea I need you to hold on to for the next 15 minutes, because everything I am about to show you hangs off it. The Big Bang Theory is a multi-camera sitcom with a laugh track. And that laugh track had a job, a very specific job. Every single time something genuinely dark happened on that show, the laugh track was right there to tell you instantly, it is fine, that was funny, laugh now. And we did, every time. For 12 years straight. Now stack a second idea on top of that one. Sheldon Cooper is a black hole, and I mean that almost literally. In every family, in every friend group he has ever been part of, Sheldon is the center of mass. Everyone else is in orbit around him. Their schedules, their feelings, their sacrifices, all of it bends around his gravity. And a black hole has one defining property. It pulls everything inward and it lets nothing back out. Light goes in, light does not come out. Hold those two things in your head, the laugh track and the black hole, and let me walk you through the evidence. Because honestly, once you start looking for it, it is everywhere. Let me start with Soft Kitty. It is the song his mother sang to him when he was a sick little boy back in Texas. A small, warm, tender thing that a mother does for her child. And what does the adult version of Sheldon do with that memory? He requires it from everyone. When he is sick, Penny has to sing it to him. When he is anxious, Amy has to sing it to him. He pulls that comfort ritual out of every single woman who gets close enough to him. And not once, not one single time across all 12 seasons does Sheldon ever sing Soft Kitty to somebody else who is hurting. It only ever flows in one direction, inward. The laugh track tells you, "Aw, look, the genius needs his little lullaby, isn't that precious?" The dark truth is that you are watching a grown man who has only ever learned how to receive comfort and has never once learned how to give it. Then there is the spot, his spot on the couch. We all know the bit. Sheldon has one cushion, one exact location, and if you sit in it, the world ends. He will stand over you. He will recite the airflow, the sight lines, the optimal temperature in winter, the optimal temperature in summer. And eventually, you move, because it is just not worth the fight. It is one of the most repeated jokes in the entire series. But step back and look at what is actually happening in that room. A group of grown adults reorganizes itself every single time around the comfort of one man who cannot tolerate change, and nobody ever sits him down and gently asks why a person needs that much control over 1 square foot of furniture just to feel safe. They just give it to him because it is easier. The laugh track calls it a quirk. What you are really watching is an entire social circle quietly bending their lives around one man's anxiety and being trained episode after episode to find it adorable. And it scales up. It goes from a cushion to a and tracked out the roommate agreement, the relationship agreement. Sheldon literally writes binding legal documents that govern how the people who love him are allowed to behave. When Leonard is permitted to have a guest, what Amy is allowed to expect from him physically and emotionally. The show frames these as the cutest thing in the world, the lovable nerd and his binders and his clauses. But read it cold, with the laughter switched off. This is a man who needs to legislate the inner lives of the people closest to him, in writing, in advance, because the only way he can stand to be loved is on terms he has already drafted and can enforce. That is not a quirk. That is the architecture of someone who is profoundly afraid. And speaking of Amy, think about what that woman absorbed. She loved Sheldon for years, and for years he gave her almost nothing back. No physical affection, no I love you. She waited and waited, rationing tiny crumbs of progress, a held hand treated like a milestone, a single kiss treated like a gift he was bestowing on her. The show plays it as the slow burn romance of two awkward people. But sit with it. A woman pours genuine love into a man, and the man receives all of it and meters out almost nothing in return for years, and we are taught to find the imbalance charming. There is that direction again, everything in, almost nothing out. And then there is Penny. Think about who Penny actually was to him. Not family, not a fellow scientist, just the woman who happened to move in across the hall. She owed Sheldon nothing. Nothing at all. And somehow she became one of the most reliable sources of comfort in his entire life. She drove him where he needed to go. She sang him Soft Kitty when he was burning up with a fever, sitting on the edge of the bathtub like a mother soothing a sick toddler. She learned his rhythms, his rules, his panic, and she absorbed all of it. She mothered a grown man who was not her child, who was not her responsibility, and who never once asked nicely. And how did Sheldon repay the one person in California who owed him the least and gave him the most? For years, he mocked her. He called her unintelligent to her face. He sneered at her acting career, at her job, at her education, at her choices. He treated the warmest person in his entire orbit as though she were the dimmest one in it, and the laugh track loved every second of it. Every put down landed softly on a cushion of canned applause, but run the tally honestly with the sound switched off. Penny gave him patience he never earned and got contempt in return, packaged as comedy for the better part of a decade. That is the black hole one more time. It does not care where the light comes from. It does not even notice. It just pulls. Now here is where the gravity gets impossible to miss. Sheldon does not drive. For year after year after year, Leonard ferries him everywhere. To work, to the comic book store, to the train shows. And it is not only Leonard. Howard drives him, Raj drives him, Penny drives him. There is an entire episode built around the logistical crisis of who is now responsible for transporting Sheldon, as if he were a piece of furniture that has to be moved by committee. This group of supposed equals function ends, for a huge portion of the show, as an unpaid staff of caretakers. And every single time they do it, the laugh track says, "Ha! That is just Sheldon being Sheldon." But if you have seen my video on George Cooper, you already recognize this shape. You already know exactly what it looks like when an entire system organizes itself around one person's needs and calls it normal. George was the power outlet that the whole family plugged into and that nobody ever plugged back in to recharge. Missy was the glass child that the entire household looked straight through. And Sheldon is the thing they were all looking at instead. He is the gravity well that bent every single one of those people out of their own orbit. The reason George was alone in his own house. The reason Missy was invisible at her own dinner table. The reason Mary slowly lost herself. It all has the same center of mass, and his name is Sheldon. Now, before I push this any further, I owe you a moment of fairness, because I am not interested in being a liar. There is exactly one moment where Sheldon breaks the pattern, and it matters. When Howard's mother dies, suddenly off-screen, Howard is destroyed, and it is Sheldon, of all people, who sits with him. Sheldon, who tells Howard that he understands, because he lost his own father suddenly too, that he knows what it is to have a parent there in the morning and gone forever by the night. Is the most human thing he ever does. And here is why I am telling you about it instead of hiding it. Because it proves he was capable. He could reach across and give comfort instead of taking it. He had it in him the whole time, which means every other time he did not. It was not because the wiring made it impossible. It was because nobody had ever taught him that the current was supposed to run both ways. That does not make him a monster. It makes him something sadder. And here is the part that genuinely got under my skin. Because Sheldon does not just consume the labor of the people around him, he rewrites them. Think about what adult Sheldon tells his friends in California about his own father. He says George was a drunk, he says he caught him cheating, and that the whole triple knock comes from that betrayal. For 12 years, on the bigger show, that was the official record. George Cooper, the cartoon, the deadbeat, the punchline. And then young Sheldon went back and showed us the truth. It showed us a wounded, decent, bone-tired man who turned down his dream job to keep his family stable, who drove across half of Texas to force a scientist to take his strange 9-year-old seriously, who threw his own body over his daughter in a ditch during a tornado, and who died alone in an empty locker room a few hours after finally being told that he mattered. Was George perfect? No, he drank. He let himself get dangerously close to the neighbor Brenda. The man had real cracks, but a drunk cheat who scarred his son for life, that man never existed. Because that cheating moment, the one that supposedly broke young Sheldon and gave us the famous knock, young Sheldon finally showed us what actually happened. The other woman was Mary, his own mother. In a blonde wig and a costume she had brought back from Germany, surprising her husband, trying to put a spark back into a tired marriage. Sheldon did not recognize her. He never asked a single question. He turned around, walked out, and built a 30-year grudge on top of a misunderstanding. And then he carried that grudge across the country and told it to everyone he ever met as if it were a simple, settled fact. Is the dark truth distilled into one example. Sheldon's memory is not a camera. It is a story he edits constantly to keep himself at the center and to keep himself blameless. He took the single most sacrificial person in his entire life and flattened him into a joke, and he never once knew that he had done it. Now I can already hear the objection, because it is a good one, and I refuse to dodge it. You are going to say, hold on, the show clearly codes Sheldon as autistic. The rigid routines, the literal mind, the inability to read a face, the sensory overload, the meltdowns. You cannot put a man on trial for the way his brain is built. And you are right. You are completely right. He did not choose his wiring, and he is not a villain. I want to be extremely clear about that because this is exactly the trap the show quietly sets for you. It hands you two doors. Either Sheldon is adorable or Sheldon is a monster. And both of those doors are wrong. The dark truth is the third door, the one the laugh track exists to keep shut. It is not that Sheldon was cruel on purpose. It is that the cost was completely real anyway. The people around him gave up enormous pieces of their own lives to keep him comfortable, and the show coded every bit of that sacrifice as comedy, specifically so that you would never sit down and add up the bill. The tragedy here is not moral, it is structural. There is no villain in this story, And somehow that makes it so much worse because there is nobody to point at, and the damage still happened anyway. And the damage keeps compounding because the black hole never sees the bill. Sheldon goes off to California genuinely believing his brother Georgie is a deadbeat and a fool because Mary hid from him everything that Georgie sacrificed after their father died. The kid who dropped out, ran a business, supported a grieving mother, and a newbie. Born while he was still basically a child himself, Sheldon never knew. He spent his adult life believing he came from a lazy drunk and a useless brother, when in reality, both of those men quietly broke themselves to hold his entire world up. The black hole does not even know it is pulling. That might be the loneliest fact in the whole story. He consumed the love and the labor of an entire family and walked away honestly convinced that he had done all of it on his own. So let me take you to the moment it all turns, because the good stories always turn. Season 12, the series finale. Sheldon and Amy win the Nobel Prize in Physics. He is standing at the podium in Stockholm, and he has his speech ready, the long one, the one he has apparently been writing since childhood, packed with the names of everyone who ever doubted him, and a promise that they would all rue the day. And he opens his mouth to begin, and then he looks up, and he sees them. Leonard, Penny, Howard, Bernadette, Raj, Amy. The people who drove him around for a decade, the people who sang him the song, the people who signed his contracts and surrendered their spots on the couch and absorbed every ounce of his gravity for years without ever being thanked for it. And for the first time in his entire life, the black hole emits light. He sets the speech aside. He tells the entire watching world that he was under a misapprehension, that he used to believe his accomplishments belonged to him alone, and that nothing could be further from the truth. He says he has been encouraged and sustained and inspired and tolerated by the greatest group of friends a person could ask for. He asks them to stand one by one. He even calls Howard an astronaut, the recognition he had withheld for years. And he tells them he is sorry he was not the friend they deserved, but that in his own strange way, he loves them all. It is without question the single most generous thing Sheldon Cooper ever does. And it is beautiful. I am not going to sit here and pretend that it is not. But here is what finishes me. Here is the thought I genuinely cannot put down. He begins that speech by thanking his family, his mother, his father, his Mima, his brother, and his sister. He finally says it out loud in front of the whole world. He thanks his father, and his father is not there. His father has been in the ground for decades. George Cooper, the man who drove across Texas so that one stranger would look at his strange little boy's work. The man who turned down his own dream so the boy could keep his routines. The man who died alone in a locker room a few hours after someone finally told him he mattered. That man will never hear it. The single acknowledgement George spent his entire life never getting, the one he deserved more than anyone, arrives on a stage in Sweden, decades too late, spoken to a father who cannot hear a word of it, and young Sheldon knows it. There is a moment near the very end when adult Sheldon, now a father himself, looks back and admits that for most of his life he focused only on his father's flaws, and that now that he is older he understands George was just a man doing the best he could, and that he did a lot, and that he did not say it at the funeral but he can say it now, that he loved his father and will miss him forever. He says it now. Now when the man is 30 years gone and will never, ever hear it. That is the most painful kind of forgiveness there is. The kind where the person you are finally forgiving has been dead for half your life. That is the dark truth about Sheldon Cooper. Not that he was difficult. We always knew he was difficult. The dark truth is that the show knew it was a tragedy the entire time, and it laughed on purpose so that you would not. So let us go back to that knock. Knock, knock, knock. We thought it was a catchphrase. We thought it was a bit, something to chant at our friends and print on a shirt. It was a little boy who learned far too early that the world was not a safe place and who built himself one small ritual to make it survivable and carried that ritual all the way into adulthood, never telling a soul why. And we put it on a mug and we laughed. Sheldon Cooper was never the smartest man in the room. He was the loneliest, and he was the very last one to find out. If you have been sitting here in 4A with me through all of this, and you cannot unsee it now either, then welcome to the club, because I promise you I cannot either. So tell me down in the comments, is Sheldon the victim of this whole story, or is he the reason there is a story to tell at all? I read every single one of them, and if this one got to you, go watch the one I made about why Raj was the most alone person in the entire show, because I am telling you right now, that one is even harder to sit with than this. I will see you back in 4A.